Everything you've been taught about reality is wrong, because the ones who taught you never wanted you to know how powerful you actually are. From the moment you took your first breath, you were born into a world of illusions, not by mistake, but by design. A world that trains you to believe in limits, in death as finality, in linear time, in chaos without meaning. But hidden beneath the noise of modern life, buried under layers of distortion and denial, is an ancient current of truth that was never lost, just hidden. Thoth, the ancient figure revered across Egyptian, Greek, and Hermetic traditions, didn't leave behind myths. He left behind a manual, a system, a blueprint for mastering reality that's been deliberately buried under the rubble of empire, academia, and spiritual half-truths. These aren't feel-good mantras or recycled Instagram wisdom. These are real teachings, dangerous ones. The kind that don't just change how you think, they change who you are. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. You were never meant to know this. That's why no one ever told you. Thoth's teachings weren't misplaced or forgotten. They were buried on purpose, not by time, but by institutions terrified of what they reveal. For thousands of years, knowledge that could awaken your true nature was methodically concealed, discredited, or repackaged into hollow fragments. This wasn't a matter of historical oversight. It was a strategic operation to keep humanity bound to the visible, the measurable, the controllable. Because if people understood the depth of what Thoth taught, they wouldn't just start asking different questions, they'd start building a different reality. This knowledge threatened power, not political power, but the power over perception, the kind that keeps empires standing, religions in control, and systems unquestioned. When you realize that consciousness creates form, when you understand that thought shapes time, and that your mind can literally alter the structure of matter, the idea of authority begins to crumble. No ruler, no system, no dogma can stand on ground where every individual is a sovereign architect of reality. That's why Thoth's blueprint was encoded in symbols, metaphors, geometry, and riddles, because it had to be preserved, but not so obviously that it could be destroyed. His wisdom wasn't just stolen, it was inverted. The same societies that condemned esoteric teachings as heresy used them behind closed doors. Secret orders, royal bloodlines, priesthoods, many built their inner rituals directly on Hermetic truths while feeding the masses superstition. They used the sacred for control while convincing the world it was profane. Over time, these teachings were watered down, coated in mysticism, or dismissed entirely as fiction. The Emerald Tablets became legend, the lore of mentalism became a metaphor, and the sacred geometry of consciousness was turned into academic footnotes or occult fringe material. And that's exactly how the system wanted it. Today, when you search for Thoth, you'll find myths, cartoons, and surface-level spirituality. But if you go deeper, past the noise, you begin to see the outlines of something far more advanced, a system of understanding reality that doesn't beg for belief. It demands exploration. His writings weren't religious doctrine. They were quantum blueprints hidden in plain sight. When Thoth spoke of the All, he wasn't describing a god to worship. He was describing a frequency field. When he spoke of the planes, he wasn't being poetic. He was describing energetic dimensions. These weren't stories. They were instructions. But here's the part that most people miss. This system was never meant to stay secret forever. It was designed for the moment humanity reached a point of readiness. That moment is now. Why else do you think you're here, listening to this, feeling like you're remembering something you've never been taught? Some of what we've uncovered can't be shared here. Sign up to the free Insights Academy newsletter below to access hidden knowledge we can't legally say on YouTube, including your free digital copy of the Kybalion for a limited time. The first teachings begin with the mind, not the brain, the mind. Thoth's principle that all is mind isn't a metaphor. It's a direct statement of fact. Reality is mental. Everything you see, touch, feel, and believe exists inside a field of conscious awareness, and your perception is the lens that shapes it. You've been taught to believe that you live in a physical universe, where your thoughts are private, meaningless noise inside your skull. But Thoth taught the opposite. Thought is the architect of experience. Frequency is the blueprint. Emotion is the fuel. And belief is the key. This is why the system had to keep you distracted. Every mechanism around you, from the education system to entertainment, to religion and even language, is designed to disconnect you from your power to shape reality. You're told to focus on what's real, what's scientific, what's logical, but only by definitions they've approved. And yet, the very science they revere is now catching up to what Thoth knew thousands of years ago. Quantum physics is proving what ancient mystics understood. Observation alters the outcome, intention shifts matter, time isn't linear, and energy responds to awareness. Thoth's teachings weren't primitive beliefs. They were advanced technologies of the soul. His truths threaten the entire infrastructure of modern thought because they make one thing clear. You are not a servant of the system. You are a system. And once you remember how to access it, everything changes. The universe is not made of matter. It's made of mind. That's not philosophy. That's physics, and it's exactly what Thoth was teaching long before science caught up. He didn't waste time explaining gods with human emotions or spinning myths to keep people obedient. He gave instructions, pure, functional, esoteric technologies dressed as spiritual ideas, designed for those ready to see beyond the surface. When Thoth said, "All is mind," he wasn't offering an opinion. He was laying out the foundation of how reality operates. Thought is the substance behind substance. The world you experience isn't happening to you. It's being filtered, shaped, and reflected by your state of consciousness. And the moment you understand that, you stop living as a victim of circumstance and begin operating as a conscious participant in creation itself. This is where it gets uncomfortable for some, because it places responsibility back in your hands. If your thoughts, frequency, and emotional state are crafting your reality, then the chaos in your life isn't random, it's reactive. Not always your fault, but always a reflection. Thoth called this alignment. He taught that when your thoughts, emotions, and actions operate in harmony with the laws of the universe, reality bends with you, not against you. And that's not manifestation in the watered-down, wish-upon-a-star sense. It's mechanics. Consciousness is causal. Everything else is effect. He also broke down how vibration is the architecture behind all form. What you call solid objects are just frequencies slowed down into visibility. You don't see the field, you see the freeze frame. But underneath every person, every object, every emotion is a vibrational code. Shift the code, and the form changes. This is why rituals, sound, symbols, and even intention are not superstitions. They are tools. Real tools for real work. The ancients weren't primitive. They just spoke in a symbolic language because truth that is this powerful can't be handed to just anyone. It has to be activated. Modern science calls it quantum field theory. Thoth called it the great mental plane. But the idea is the same. The field responds to consciousness. And when you begin working with that truth intentionally, things begin to move, internally, then externally. Reality stops being static. Synchronicities accelerate. Patterns shift. The magic you once laughed at or feared begins revealing itself as law in motion. You don't need belief. You need alignment. Thoth's teachings go deeper than just creating your reality. They show you how to do it cleanly, without ego, without manipulation, without short-circuiting your own evolution. Because just like nature, consciousness has laws. He taught that the same principles that govern the planets govern your mind. Polarity, rhythm, correspondence, cause and effect. These aren't abstract ideas. They're operating systems. When you're out of sync, your life feels unstable, reactive, confusing. When you align with them, the external world becomes a mirror that works with you instead of against you. And that's why most people never experience their own power. They try to control the external without ever mastering the internal. They use rituals like spells, affirmations, and intention boards without understanding the principle behind them. Thoth taught that power without wisdom is destruction. That's why true esoteric knowledge was always hidden behind initiation. It wasn't about secrecy, it was about responsibility. If you can shift reality by shifting your mind, then the quality of your thoughts becomes your sacred duty. You've been trained to think that spirituality is separate from science, and that consciousness is some byproduct of brain chemistry. But Thoth showed that consciousness is primary, that everything physical emerges from the mental, not the other way around. This flips the entire materialist worldview upside down. It also means that your personal evolution is not limited by what you see, but by how you think. Every limit you accept becomes part of your field. Every belief you challenge weakens the illusion. The teachings of Thoth were never about worshipping deities or escaping the world. They were about taking your place within it, as a co-creator. Not a god above others, but a conscious participant in the greater intelligence that animates all things. A drop of the all, with the capacity to remember itself. That's what they didn't want you to know. That's what the noise of modern life is designed to drown out. But now the signal is coming through again. And this time, you're ready to hear it. You were taught that time moves in a straight line, from past to present to future. That you're born, you age, and then you die. One direction, one path, no going back. That was the first lie. Thoth didn't just reject this concept, he dismantled it. He taught that time is not linear, but spiral. It loops, folds, expands, and contracts depending on your state of consciousness. The past isn't gone. The future isn't waiting. They're both happening now. This isn't a poetic metaphor, it's literal instruction. You are not walking through time. Time is unfolding through you. This is one of the most radical teachings in the Emerald Tablets, and one of the most suppressed, because if time is not fixed, then your fate isn't either. If you can access other points in time consciously, you're no longer bound by the scripted version of life the system has designed for you. You're not a bystander, you're a navigator. Thoth mapped this through symbols, numbers, and geometry, the spiral, the infinity loop, the Ouroboros. These weren't decorations, they were codes, markers of how energy and awareness move through dimensions. When Thoth said, "Man is a flame bound to a mountain," he was speaking about consciousness trapped in matter, confined to a timeline until it remembers it can move. And when it does, everything changes. The events you thought defined you begin to unravel. You start to see patterns, echoes of past choices looping into present moments. Déjà vu, dreams, intuition, sudden emotional shifts. They're not glitches, they're bleed-throughs. Pockets in the spiral where time collapses and the linear illusion breaks. Most people ignore them, but the initiated use them. According to Thoth, those who awaken to the spiral nature of time can move through it with intention. Not by hopping into a time machine, but by tuning their frequency. Memory isn't just in the mind, it's in the field. And the future is not somewhere you arrive at, it's something you broadcast. When you align your thoughts, emotions, and energy with a specific version of the future, you start to collapse probabilities. The field responds. Synchronicities accelerate, and the timeline shifts. This isn't fantasy, this is a forgotten science. Indigenous cultures, mystics, and quantum physicists have all touched on it in different ways, but Thoth was one of the first to teach it systematically. He described how certain states of meditation and ritual can dissolve the illusion of time entirely, allowing the practitioner to receive knowledge, healing, and even transformation from other points along the spiral. What you think of as past life isn't something that happened before, it's something happening in parallel, across a different layer of the same spiral. This also means you're not chained to your past. Whatever trauma, programming, or limitation you think you carry, it's not static. It can be rewritten. If you can access the point, you can alter the pattern. Thoth called this the mastery of the cycles. Those who can see the spiral can step off the wheel. Karma, fate, repetition, they only trap those who walk blind. But once you remember how time really moves, you start living from a different vantage point, not reacting, but responding, not waiting, but creating. Look around. The system keeps you trapped in clock time for a reason. Alarm bells, 9 to 5 structures, deadlines, schedules. These are not tools of efficiency, they're tools of entrainment. Your biology, your emotion, even your thoughts have been synced to artificial rhythms. And over time, you start to believe that those rhythms are you. But deep within, your being remembers a different tempo, the spiral hum, the pulse of the greater field. That's why moments of awe, flow, love, and deep creativity feel timeless, because they are. Time is not your enemy, it's your medium. Thoth's teachings invite you to stop seeing time as a cage and start using it as a canvas. You are not late, you are not early, you are exactly where your frequency placed you. But that frequency can shift, and with it, everything else moves. You're not here to walk the spiral passively. You're here to move through it with precision, with presence, with power. And the moment you begin, time starts listening. Death has been weaponized, not in the literal sense, but in the psychological one. From the moment you were old enough to understand what it meant, you were taught to fear it, to see it as an end, a wall, a void, a final breath before the lights go out. And that's not by accident, because a person who fears death will obey. They'll submit. They'll cling to systems, beliefs, and authorities that promise safety, even if that safety is a lie. But Thoth didn't teach fear. He taught remembrance. And according to him, death is not the end. It's a door, a transition, a shift in frequency, not disappearance, but transformation. Thoth called death the great portal, a passage from one plane to another. In his writings, he described multiple layers of existence, each more subtle than the last. The physical body is only the outermost shell, a vessel through which consciousness experiences density. When it breaks down, the awareness within doesn't vanish. It moves. It slips into the next frequency band, what he referred to as the astral and etheric planes. These aren't fictional dimensions or dreamscapes. They are just as real as this one, but they operate at different speeds, different densities, different laws. You don't see them because your senses are tuned to the material. But the soul never forgets. And that's the part the system doesn't want you to realize. If you understood that your consciousness continues, that your essence cannot be destroyed, you wouldn't be so easy to control. You wouldn't waste your life fearing the unknown or selling your time for security. You'd start asking bigger questions. You'd start living with purpose, not compliance. That's why death is wrapped in taboo and silence. Because if you saw it clearly, you'd stop playing small. Thoth didn't romanticize death. He respected it. He taught that it's a sacred threshold, one that can be crossed with awareness or in unconsciousness. Most people, he said, drift through it like sleepwalkers, pulled by fear or regret, tethered by unresolved attachments. But those who awaken in life can awaken in death. Through preparation, meditation, and alignment, the soul can carry memory, clarity, and intention beyond the veil. That's not religion, that's navigation. This is why many of his teachings focused on energetic mastery. He taught that the more you align with universal law while alive, the more fluid your transition becomes. Death doesn't erase your frequency, it magnifies it. If your life was spent in fear, guilt, and attachment, those frequencies echo forward. If it was spent in presence, clarity, and conscious creation, those states carry over, not as punishment or reward, but as resonance. He also warned of becoming trapped in the in-between, places where souls linger, unaware that they've passed, still seeking closure, still clinging to the material. These realms, the shadow zones, were not hell, but distortion. Confusion born from unprepared minds. That's why initiation was vital. Not to join a group, but to become sovereign across dimensions. To recognize yourself, not just in the mirror, but in the mirrorless space beyond form. Modern science tiptoes around these ideas with clinical terms, near-death experiences, brain chemistry, hypnagogic states. But many who have stood on that edge return with the same truth. Consciousness does not die. There is movement, there is light, there is something. And that something is not random. It's intelligent. It responds to your state, your awareness, your will. Thoth knew this, and he left maps. Not literal diagrams, but symbolic keys, rituals, invocations, visualizations, methods to orient the soul in the space beyond. One of his most profound messages was this: don't wait until death to remember who you are. If you can master awareness here, you carry that power with you. You don't have to be surprised when the body drops. You can walk through the portal with clarity, knowing the truth that was hidden from you your whole life, that you are not the body. You are the awareness behind it, and awareness, aligned with truth, does not end. It evolves. The fear of death is one of the deepest chains humanity wears. But once that chain breaks, something incredible happens. You start to live, not cautiously but consciously, not to avoid risk, but to embody truth. You begin to see every moment as part of a much wider journey, not a race toward the grave, but a spiral of experience, learning, and remembrance. Thoth didn't just want you to understand death. He wanted you to prepare for it, not out of dread, but reverence. Because the way you die is shaped by the way you live. And when you live with awareness, you realize something simple, profound, and dangerous to every system of control. Death isn't the end. It's just the beginning. You've been taught to look outward for power, success, control, recognition, all external pursuits framed as marks of progress. But Thoth flipped that entire model on its head. To him, power wasn't something you chase, it was something you activate, not by dominating the world, but by mastering yourself, and not in the watered-down self-help sense of improving your mindset. He meant something far deeper. He taught that within you exists a layered system of consciousness, a multi-dimensional operating system coded with energy centers, thought currents, and access points to planes of existence most people will never touch, not because they're incapable, but because they've been trained to ignore it. This is the essence of inner alchemy. Thoth wasn't preaching morality, he was teaching mechanics. He showed how your body, your emotions, and your thoughts form an integrated system, one that can either run automatically, shaped by fear and programming, or consciously, led by will and alignment. He described the human being not as a singular entity, but as a blend of forces: the physical body, the energy body, the mental plane, the causal layer, the higher self, each one with its own rules, its own function, its own gateway to greater awareness. And the key to awakening them? Responsibility. Not guilt, not shame. Responsibility. Ownership of your vibration, your thoughts, your choices, your direction. Thoth didn't offer salvation. He offered tools, rituals, affirmations, silence, breath, geometry, sound. These weren't decorations for spirituality. They were instruments for tuning your frequency. Because that's what self-mastery really is, tuning. And most people are out of tune, not broken, just misaligned. Their emotional bodies are hijacked by unresolved trauma. Their mental fields are clouded by distraction and fear. Their energy systems are sluggish from disconnection. So they move through life like a distorted signal, wondering why nothing flows. But once you begin the work, not the work of performance, but the work of remembering, you realize how much of your identity is borrowed. Your beliefs, your triggers, your patterns, they're inherited, absorbed, repeated. And the moment you question them, you create space. Space for the real self to emerge. Thoth called this the return to center, the process of unlearning, stripping back the noise, and realigning your core frequency with the higher blueprint you carry inside. He taught that mastery isn't about control, it's about coherence. The more you align your inner systems, the more effortlessly you move through the world. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop resisting what is. You stop leaking energy trying to be someone you're not. You stop chasing validation from systems that profit off your insecurity. And in that stillness, in that clarity, your real power begins to rise. Most people think enlightenment is a destination, a single moment of bliss or knowledge, but Thoth described it as a process, a refining of the self across lifetimes, a slow burn, not a spark. And he warned that the ego will often hijack this journey, disguising pride as purpose, superiority as insight. That's why humility is not weakness, it's the compass. Without it, you're not a seeker, you're a collector of concepts, using spiritual language to armor your unresolved wounds. Real mastery is quiet. It doesn't need to be seen, it simply is. And here's the paradox. The deeper you go into the self, the more you realize there is no separate self. The I that observes, the I that chooses, the I that expands, it's not the personality, it's awareness, the observer, the current behind the character. And when that awareness awakens within form, you stop asking the world for permission. You don't need it. You were born with access to something beyond the five senses, beyond approval, beyond limitation, and no one can give it to you. They can only remind you that it's there. Thoth didn't offer comfort. He offered the truth, sometimes sharp, sometimes confronting, always liberating. He knew that until you mastered yourself, the world would master you. And the systems you live under, education, media, religion, culture, they all benefit from your disconnection. They reward distraction. They monetize insecurity. They glorify image and suppress depth. And if you don't reclaim your inner space, they'll fill it for you with noise, with fear, with false gods and broken promises. But once you begin the path of mastery, real mastery, not performance, you become dangerous to the system. Not because you're loud, but because you're clear. Not because you rebel, but because you remember. And that remembering is the spark, the beginning of a life that's no longer dictated by external scripts, but directed from within. That's what they never wanted you to realize, that all the power you've been searching for has been living in you the entire time, waiting, not for permission, but for attention. The reason you've never heard these teachings isn't because they're obscure. It's because they've been buried intentionally, methodically, and over generations. The system you live in wasn't built to empower you. It was built to shape you, to train your perception, to decide for you what's real, what's credible, what's safe to explore. And anything that threatens that control gets buried, discredited, or rebranded until it's toothless. That's exactly what happened with the teachings of Thoth. This wasn't just historical erosion. This was a strategic erasure. When empires rose, they didn't just conquer land, they conquered memory. Knowledge that couldn't be used to control the masses was hidden behind walls of symbolism, locked in secret orders, or mocked into myth. Thoth's writings, his codes, his system of initiation, they were too dangerous to leave in the open. So they were distorted. His name became a cartoon, a caricature. His teachings were split apart, scattered across religions, philosophies, and mystery schools, never reassembled in full. You got fragments, echoes, not the source. The modern world doesn't fear fantasy. It fears the truth. And truth, when it's ancient, unfiltered, and empowering, is a direct threat to institutions that profit from your confusion. Universities call it a myth. Religions call it blasphemy. Science calls it pseudoscience. The media calls it conspiracy. All of it is the same tactic. Ridicule what can't be controlled. Reduce it to entertainment. Keep you distracted with versions of reality that feel safe, familiar, predictable. But look closer. The fingerprints of Thoth are everywhere, if you know how to see them. They appear in architecture, in symbols carved into government buildings and monuments. They whisper through the language of secret societies, many of which were founded on hermetic principles and then hollowed out into gatekeeping institutions. You find them in the patterns of sacred geometry, in the structure of music, in the proportions of the human body. You find them in the major religious texts, buried beneath parables and poetic language, but never fully explained, never shown for what they are, operating instructions for a human being who remembers what it is. Why? Because control relies on forgetfulness. If you forget that your thoughts create reality, you'll never question why your life feels stagnant. If you forget that time is a spiral, you'll never look back and realize how patterns are repeating. If you forget that death is a transition, you'll do anything to avoid it, even live a lie. Forgetfulness is the currency of modern civilization. That's why comfort is sold to you at every turn. Comfortable beliefs, comfortable distractions, a comfortable version of history where real power was never yours to begin with. The truth is, the system doesn't need to censor these teachings anymore. It's already done its job. It made them boring. It made them woo. It buried them beneath New Age fluff and academic condescension. It trained you to roll your eyes at the very knowledge that could set you free. That's the genius of the system. It didn't burn the truth. It buried it under noise. But that's starting to change. Slowly, quietly. People are remembering, people like you, who feel the pull toward something deeper, who hear a truth in these words that bypasses logic and lands somewhere ancient in your being. That's not a coincidence. That's the resonance. You've been here before, maybe not in body, but in awareness, and some part of you never forgot. The Emerald Tablets were never meant to be mainstream. They were meant for those who asked the right questions, who saw through the cracks, who felt the weight of the world's illusion and said, there has to be more than this. And there is. But you won't find it in a textbook or a trending video. You'll find it by peeling back the layers of conditioning, by stepping outside the narrative you were handed and into the one you were born to remember. This is why they've hidden it. Because a person who remembers can't be manipulated, can't be sold for a false purpose, can't be herded like cattle into belief systems that strip them of sovereignty. Thoth's teachings were never about worshipping him. They were about reclaiming the blueprint of who you are, not a consumer, not a follower, not a passive participant in a dying system, but a conscious architect of your own reality. And the moment enough of us remember that, the entire structure begins to crack. You don't need to join a secret society to start this journey. You don't need to wear a robe, light a candle, or chant words you don't understand. Thoth's initiation doesn't begin in a temple. It begins in the silence behind your thoughts, in the quiet awareness that watches everything but rarely speaks. That space, the one you're barely taught to notice, is the doorway. And that's the great irony. The most powerful knowledge isn't locked away behind gates. It's hidden in the one place most people never think to look, within. Thoth's teachings weren't about external rituals. They were about internal alignment. The Emerald Tablets weren't commandments. They were blueprints for navigating consciousness. He didn't tell you what to believe. He gave you a system to experience truth directly. That's initiation. Not memorizing ideas, but activating awareness. Not adopting a new identity, but shedding the one you never chose. And that's where it gets uncomfortable. Because self-initiation means confronting everything you've been avoiding. The distractions, the emotional baggage, the patterns you've normalized but never questioned. Most people think awakening is a lightning bolt, but more often, it's a slow burn, a quiet erosion of lies. You begin to notice where you're not free, the relationships that drain you, the beliefs that shrink you, the habits that keep you numb. And then you face a choice. Ignore it and slip back into the dream, or follow the pull, even if it breaks everything you thought was real. That moment, right there, is the beginning of real initiation. It's not glamorous, it's not aesthetic, it's raw, it's personal, and it's sacred. Thoth's path is simple, but it's not easy. It demands presence. Not the kind you fake in a meditation app, but the kind that stares straight into discomfort and refuses to look away. He taught that every trigger is a teacher. Every emotional charge is a signal. Your body, your mind, your energy field. They're not obstacles to escape. They're tools. They're maps. The ancient wisdom wasn't designed to take you out of life. It was designed to take you deeper into it, with awareness, with sovereignty, with intention. And that's the real work. You don't need more information. You need integration. You already know the truth. You've read it, felt it, maybe even lived flashes of it. But knowing isn't the same as being. Thoth's teachings don't care how many quotes you remember. They ask, do you live it? When fear shows up, can you meet it with presence instead of panic? When illusion tempts you, can you see through it without attachment? When silence comes, can you rest in it without reaching for distraction? These are the initiations that matter, the quiet ones, the unseen ones, the moments where you choose truth over comfort, clarity over control, growth over performance. Thoth knew that the external world was a mirror, but the real transformation starts behind the eyes. That's why his writings often seem cryptic. They weren't meant to be decoded by logic alone. They were meant to be felt, lived, unraveled over time. That's the beauty of initiation. It unfolds in layers. Each insight reveals another. Each choice creates new resonance. And the more aligned you become, the more the teachings make sense, not intellectually, but viscerally, like a language your soul already speaks. You don't need to escape your life to walk this path. You need to bring awareness into it, into your breath, your choices, your reactions, your silence. That's where the real power lives, not in spectacle, but in presence, not in escape, but in embodiment. Thoth didn't teach people to run from the world. He taught them to walk through it with eyes open and heart awake. And maybe that's why you're here, not to learn something new, but to remember something ancient, not to become someone else, but to finally come back to who you were before the noise. The initiation isn't somewhere out there. It's already begun. Every word you've read, every moment you've paused, every truth that resonated, that was the signal calling you inward, not to consume more, but to begin living what you already know. There's a reason this message is reaching you now, not last year, not when you first stumbled onto a so-called spiritual path, but now, because something is shifting. Individually, yes, but more importantly, collectively. People all over the world are starting to feel it, the sense that something's wrong beneath the surface of everyday life, the growing itch that there's more to this reality than we've been told. This isn't a coincidence. This is convergence, a tipping point. And the teachings of Thoth weren't meant just for personal transformation. They were designed to spark something much larger, something that happens when individuals remember who they are and then begin to find each other. The system thrives on separation. Divide and conquer isn't just a military strategy, it's a psychological one. Separate people by race, religion, belief, gender, wealth, status. Make them feel alone in their thoughts, isolated in their awakenings. That way, even when someone begins to wake up, they hesitate, they second guess, they keep quiet, because nothing feels more dangerous than thinking differently in a world that punishes difference. But when those quiet thinkers begin to speak, begin to connect, something incredible happens. The illusion loses its grip. Thoth never intended these teachings to be hoarded or hidden away by the few. He encoded them for those who would one day be ready to use them, not just to escape the system, but to transform it, to rewrite the field. Because consciousness is not static. It's viral. It spreads through resonance, through language, through presence. When one person wakes up, it doesn't just affect their own life. It sends out ripples into the collective mind, and those ripples touch others, triggering the same questions, the same hunger, the same remembering. This is the power of shared consciousness. Not hive mind, not groupthink, but a network of awakened individuals who each bring their own frequency, their own perspective, their own truth, but who are united in one thing: the decision to no longer be controlled. And that kind of decision, when multiplied, becomes a force. Not a rebellion, but a revelation. That's why ancient texts like the Emerald Tablets were preserved, because they hold a blueprint not only for personal mastery, but for collective awakening. A roadmap for how to move from a disconnected, fearful population to a synchronized, empowered civilization. But it starts small. It starts with one person, then two, then 10, then 1,000, until the ones who remember outnumber the ones who forget. And when that happens, the systems built on fear and control begin to collapse, because they only survive in the absence of awareness. Think about it. Every movement, every revolution, every shift in history started the same way, with an idea whose time had come. We're at that threshold again. But this time, it's not about ideology. It's about consciousness, about choosing to operate from a higher frequency, to opt out of the fear matrix, and to stop waiting for permission to live freely and fully. The internet, for all its chaos, is the modern-day echo chamber of awakening. And you being here right now isn't random. It's a reflection of the field responding to your signal. The path ahead won't be easy. It's not always glamorous. Awakening brings clarity, but it also brings responsibility. It strips away illusions, and sometimes that hurts. You lose people. You lose comfort. You lose the ability to unsee the truth. But what you gain in return is priceless. Sovereignty, alignment, and a community of others who see through the same illusion. You stop feeling like a misfit and start recognizing yourself as part of something ancient, powerful, and rising. We are not meant to do this alone. The system has spent centuries making you think you're on your own. But the teachings of Thoth remind us otherwise. We are fractals of the same source, scattered across time and space, drawn back together by the frequency of remembrance. This moment, right now, is part of that return, and it's only just beginning. None of this is new to you. It feels new, yes, but deep down it isn't. That feeling rising in your chest as you hear these words, that quiet knowing behind your thoughts as each teaching unfolds, that's not discovery. It's recognition. You're not learning something foreign. You're remembering something that's always been inside you. Thoth's teachings aren't designed to impress your intellect. They're designed to wake you up, to reawaken a part of you that the world worked hard to put to sleep. And now, that part is stirring again. The 100 teachings of Thoth are not a checklist. They're not trivia or historical curiosity. They're not there to decorate your bookshelf or make you feel spiritually superior. They're here to initiate, to activate, to rewire, because they aren't just ideas, they're keys. Each one unlocks a door that's been shut inside your psyche. Doors that were sealed not by accident, but by the design of a system that knew how powerful you would become if you ever opened them. This is why this isn't just content. This is a crossroads. You either keep going like nothing happened, like this didn't shift something inside you, or you pause, take a breath, and realize everything is different now. Because once you see behind the curtain, you can't go back. The story you were told about life, about power, about purpose, it no longer fits. The illusion doesn't stick like it used to. The distractions don't numb like they once did. That's the cost of awakening. It strips away the noise and suddenly you're left with a question. What now? That's where the real work begins. Not the performance of spirituality, not the obsession with aesthetics or quotes or rituals that have lost their meaning, but the inner shift, the quiet integration, the moment you stop outsourcing your truth and start living it, breath by breath, moment by moment. Not perfectly, but fully. Because the real essence of Thoth's teachings is this: knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is. Information doesn't free you, embodiment does. You can know the laws of the universe and still be asleep if you don't live them. You don't need permission. You don't need approval. You don't even need more time. What you need is already inside you. That stillness you've been ignoring, that intuition you've been overriding, that fire you've been told is too much, too intense, too impossible. That's the real you. Not the version polished for others, but the one you buried to survive. Thoth's teachings aren't just about unlocking cosmic secrets. They're about digging that version of you out from under the rubble and remembering what you came here to do. If you've made it this far, you're already part of the shift. Don't miss what we're about to uncover next. Subscribe to Insights Academy below and get your free digital copy of the Kybalion before it disappears again. You came here to build, not to obey, to heal, not to conform, to remember, not to forget. These teachings were never meant for everyone. They were meant for those who could feel the weight of the illusion and still choose to see. That's you. And now that you know, the only question left is, what will you do with it? Because awakening isn't the end of the journey. It's the start of a new one. One where you stop performing and start embodying. Where you stop waiting and start creating. Where you stop living by default and start living by design. Not someone else's, but yours. And if the world isn't ready for that, good. That's how you know you're on the right path. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."